Nice. Well, thank you so much. That was amazing. I'm like mind blown by the cool work and tech you guys are building. Yeah, we're coming up to lunch soon, but I thought it could be a nice way to round off this session we've just had to introduce the ecological benefits framework that we've kind of been talking about and mentioning. This is the kind of latest deck that we can go through and just set some level setting for what I think this framework means and how we might be able to apply it today and this week to some of the work we've been doing. So yeah, let's get into it. So the result, this framework has come from a long journey, and the Lexicon is a California-based non-profit that was originally funded by Google and other large organizations like that, creating this activator or accelerator for good ideas. And they did a lot of work with the World Health Organization, the World Food Organization, in regenerative agriculture, payment for ecosystem services, all of these different sustainability kind of sectors. And they learned a lot from that process. And there was an interesting kind of learning that came, was that all of these different parties, in whether it was regenerative, reforestation, agriculture, food, when they actually boiled down to what the impacts they were talking about, there's all the practices and the methodologies they use, but when they were actually trying to describe the impacts, these 6 words kept on coming up. So the result of all of these ecological activators that have been run with this very sound methodology developed with Google is these activators. And so I was recently part of this activator for EBF, where this is the latest version of these activators that gathers all of these domain experts to kind of reach consensus around frameworks and ideas and methodologies. And so, yeah, this is some of the history of some of the work that's been done in previous activators. We mentioned a lot in food and in regenerative agriculture and biodiversity, which all kind of set the foreground for what we're talking about today, which was what was the common denominator across all of this work. Instead of actually focusing on the different practices, the certifications, how can we actually drill in specifically to the outcomes? Okay, you're doing no tilling or you're planting a tree. Cool. What does that actually mean in terms of the actual impacts, the carbon, the biodiversity, the soil? So when we're actually drilling further in, that's what we need to be measuring and reporting and finding out, as opposed to the action itself. We need to actually know what the impacts of that action is. And so through all of that process, it became very clear that these 6 words were the ways of describing the impact that was happening on the ground and in those ecosystems and to the planet. So we're going to go through those, but it's air. What is the effect on the clean air and that as a public good? The water, how is the water being used, recycled, regenerated, the quality of that, the soil, of course, the health of the soil, biodiversity. Equity brings in the social element. If you're involving local land stewards, indigenous knowledge, and creating compensation that's reversing the historic injustice that has gone on, that's creating a component of equity. And carbon. Carbon is hugely important, but if you just focus on carbon, these actually become detrimental. We've seen that in huge forestry projects where you have these giant monoculture forests that are probably owned by super rich elites that are actually harming the biodiversity, actually degrading the quality of the soil because it's a monoculture species. Water, you create surface runoff that's then getting rid of the nutrients, further degrading the soil and whatever, so if you just focus on one, it's the detriment to the others. So that's why it's super important to use this holistic framework in actually measuring what's happening. And the hope is that for, looking at the past, we've perfected the economic system based on extraction. We've developed our entire global economic structures to focus on GDP extraction and accumulation, and all of the technologies around fossil fuel infrastructure and industrial systems. We've got pretty good at it. Unfortunately, that means we're facing a series of cascading challenges that we're all very aware of. The planetary boundaries are being breached. And so far, our responses have failed to live up to muster and actually solving these issues, which are very complicated and difficult, but the carbon markets have collapsed and they have no trust. There's no accountability, there's no transparency. The impact that was promised isn't happening. ESG reporting. ExxonMobil got an ESG accreditation. You know something's wrong when the most extractive, degenerative oil company is getting ESG ratings and all of the capital is flowing there. Like, that's clearly not working. And you have now in ESG all these companies competing to put the nicest public report. It's basically they're competing on PDF documents that look pretty with promises they know they're never going to fulfill, and everyone's talking about different pieces. And okay, how do you actually like drill into what's actually happening and what are you actually doing? Who gives a toss about 2050? What are you doing now and what are the impacts on the planet? And so ESG itself is going through its own little self-crisis, and they're looking for new frameworks. And so, yeah, what if EBF could be as big as ESG, but way more impactful? And so that could be a pretty amazing thing. And yeah, to really understand EBF as well, I think this metaphor is really a nice one to look at it. Like, EBF isn't prescribing certain methodologies or ways of looking at it, or saying we have all of the solutions in all of your local context, and this is how you need to do it. EBF is more like Bluetooth. It's an enabling technology, a meme, a lexicon, a way of looking at, okay, if we want to describe what the impacts are having, these are the 6 words. It's kind of like a digital handshake. And then within that, you have a multitude of methodologies, practices, implementations, whether you're implementing it to carbon markets or to ESG analysis or to MRV. So it's really a way of looking at that and saying, okay, how can we now use the EBF framework as a lens to view this project, this thing that we're doing, this market? And so that's where the experimentation is open, right? So we have a chance in ReFi to go, how does EBF framework apply to ReFi, apply to the work we're doing, apply to on-chain carbon markets, apply to hypercerts, apply to the work you're doing with Sylvie? And so that is the hope, my hope for ReFi EBF, which is a kind of emerging project that we're hopefully going to get in the Gitcoin climate round. So yeah, it's really this insight that we were all following these different paths. You know, we could write the ReFi path on here, and we've gone on this journey together, right? But there's actually all of these other distinct kind of sectors that all act in their sort of almost isolated bubbles. The philanthropy sector have their own kind of language, way of looking at it, and they may not really speak our language of what we talk about in ReFi, and they may be a bit confused by it. But actually, all of these different things, whether it's SDGs, carbon markets, ESG, NGOs, impact investment, green bonds, ReFi, we're all trying to go in a direction that is more positive, but because we speak different languages and aren't coordinating, we kind of see we're siloed and even have conflict between each other. And so what if EBF could be this connective tissue that say, okay, we each have sort of different approaches and lenses, but which one's actually generating the most ecological benefits? And can we use that as a common framework between us to understand what's actually happening to the planet? And so, yeah, this is the destination. We need to create this EBF toolkit and all of the different kind of modules that allow us to understand everything that's going on. So our focus needs to be, how do we create the ReFi plug in terms of how is ReFi engaging with this EBF framework, and create the methodologies and the tools that allow us to connect our ecosystem into this emerging ecosystem, essentially. So yeah, this is the vibe. This is the challenges we face, and hopefully the EBF can become this digital handshake to take the challenges that we have and connect those with the solution together. So yeah, digital handshake for the planet to create positive impacts in response to the global challenges we face. Ecological benefits framework. Let's go. And yeah, so this has been the roadmap of the activator so far. Started with a consensus among these 200 different companies. You can see Gitcoin on there, Regen Network, ReFi DAO, Google, UN, a lot of these organizations coming together. Quite an interesting mix. And yeah, we started with defining some principles and some values coming together, and then we had these 6 work streams. The ReFi work stream, the payment for ecosystems work stream, and a few others. There's this EBF onboarding tool that's being developed of how do we actually create accessibility to projects to go, okay, how does my project plug into this framework? And so if we can create an app there that allows them to go through and kind of guide them through the process of developing an ecological benefits analysis. And then there's this idea for an ecological benefit bundle token for carbon markets. This is specifically saying, okay, instead of just having carbon markets, how do we account for these other forms of value? Because actually what happens is one carbon credit currently is being valued the same as another carbon credit. But what happens if, okay, that one carbon credit is creating a massive increase in biodiversity, it's healing the soils, it's healing the water, it's actually addressing equity. That's a lot of value that currently is not being expressed in those markets. And actually, if we can create the mechanisms that allows those credits to be more valuable, you're actually channeling more funds towards the community on the ground, and you're creating more valuable credit because you're actually recognizing those other sources of value and making that transparent within that existing framework. So this is the kind of potential way of doing this, and the color you can imagine actually being an MRV mechanism. If it's dark blue, you have super granular quantitative and qualitative data that gives a really accurate picture. If it's kind of a lesser shade of blue, maybe there's been some more qualitative data collection or not quite as sure on that, but it's a way to start communicating those kind of things and creating some sort of ranking and scoring and comparison between different projects, right? You can suddenly start to compare apples with oranges. Traditionally a project over here and a project over there, how the hell, when they're speaking different languages, do you understand which one is actually having more of an impact on what domains? At the moment it's a mess because everyone talks about it in a completely different way. Whereas if we can now plug those both into EBF, we can start to have some sort of, okay, this project is creating these sort of impacts, this one's this, and it allows us to create some sort of comparison between them. And this is the awesome simulator that I showed a few people last night, that's still in development, but it's a good prototype. And really, it's a tool for learning and for understanding how this quite complex market actually works. A lot of people think carbon credits, what the hell are they? Who would buy that? Who is buying that? But actually there is a number of different buyers that buy for different reasons. There's then a number of different projects that have these different ecological benefits that different buyers are interested in. There's then the markets and the technical financial systems that support that transaction. There's the digital MRV technologies, and then there's the project on the ground. So how those pieces all interconnect is shown in the simulator, which is a tool I can share with everyone. And yeah, I actually went like this when I was meant to go like this. But couple other things of notes. We did 24 case studies as part of the activator to kind of activate this framework and apply it to 24 completely diverse ecological projects around the globe to see how that refines the process. And essentially what I'm proposing is we use TDF as another one of those case studies. I've got a 80-page question set from each of the ecological benefits. The thing is with the question set, is this is the thing that Douglas said, is we have the chance to rewrite the questions. Because it's actually at the stage where they're looking for local contextual insights to refine that methodology. So we go through and we go, oh, that question's relevant to us, that question's not relevant to us, and the work that's gone on at TDF. Oh, this would be a better question to ask according to this ecological benefit. It hasn't captured this part of the impact we're having on the water or the soil. And so we have a chance to actually further develop that methodology.
So if the questions are being localized based on who's answering them, then wouldn't it be harder to ensure standardization across the 6 pillars of the EBF?
The standardization is the 6 words, and then there's a methodology library of ways to then express various claims within those ecological kind of containers, right?
But it's like the inputs into those 6 words comes from the questions that are being answered by all these projects, correct?
Yes.
So then, are all the questions being answered the same, or can different projects answer different questions? And if it's the latter, then how does that contribute to standardization? Yeah,
the standardization is the different questions that are asked in a local context. They're to try and understand the quality of the air, soil, water, and create some sort of understanding there. And so, yes, you'll have to adapt those to local context, but each adapted version will build towards some claim around the quality of the air, the soil. And yes, they may have used different methodologies to get there, and we can start to assess the validity of those different methodologies and how granular and how sure we can be of that. That's about creating the interoperability, the Bluetooth kind of way of saying, okay, we understand that this methodology is better for this context, and so we have a higher certainty and confidence in the ecological benefit claim that's being made here. And so that's where you can start to introduce the fidelity and the kind of color and the scoring systems. But again, this is an open thing to be developed. It will take a lot of refining and grappling with these kind of questions and going, oh, can we create a scoring system, or how should the coloring system work, and the certainty and kind of there. So it's a kind of needs to be built on top of, right?
Well, I was thinking when you were saying about the dark blue and the lighter changes the colour.
Yes, that can be one of the, yeah, exactly. That's one of the things being explored in terms of how you're visualizing that. And so, yeah, hopefully we can create a digital fingerprint for TDF, EBF. We'll plug that into the dashboard for impact investors. And yeah, the site has already been launched. And yeah, so the hope is that if we can start to express both the history, the present, and of TDF in terms of ecological benefits, we can maybe connect this into some form of hypercert, and we can plug this in to actually create an initial source of funding through Gitcoin and run like an EBF hypercert round where we fund, where TDF can submit their project, and we'll also then connect with indigenous communities across the globe where we'll help them to develop and express their own EBF projects. And then assisted by ReFi local nodes, turn those local EBF projects into EBF hypercerts. All of those different projects around the globe can then submit their hypercert impact claim into a round that then the community democratically allocates a pot of funding towards to fund the best ecological EBF assets that network creates. And so it'll be like a fun little challenge of who can create the coolest EBF hypercert, and we're going to have drone data, we're going to have all of the stuff we've done, the fun extra quantitative and qualitative data that we can plug into ours, and hopefully that sets a nice precedent for other projects around the globe to go, we're going to do even better, and we're going to plant more trees, and we're going to get even more data on how much awesome stuff we're doing. And hopefully it could provide a test case for how we're pioneering a new model for ecological assets. It's actually, what I think is interesting about the model I've just explained as well, is it's going beyond the market infrastructure. In some ways, we've had a lot of criticism of capitalism and markets because there's this kind of seeking of driving to the lowest cost kind of commodification, which actually externalizes costs. Whereas actually if we create this system where we're crowdsourcing different ecological benefits and then we're democratically allocating ones to the best projects as opposed to the cheapest projects. So the projects that are having the most impact get the most capital, not who are having the cheapest kind of benefit and just externalizing other costs. So that's actually a new mechanism that actually, if we prove in our space and say this is working and we're funding these projects, what other funders might start to get interested in the incredible network, Google, family offices, investment places? They might also want to be match funding sponsors for our Gitcoin rounds that's funding ecological benefits all over the globe. And suddenly we've created a new fucking climate round for ecological benefits. Let's go. So that's a bit of the potential that we could work towards together. And so yeah, this is the cool activator that we've been a part of. And yeah, it's an amazing mix of ReFi crypto projects and Google and New Day, which is the largest impact investment network in the world, and the World Food Programme, Ripple, Digital Gaia, ReFi DAO. So yeah, it's been pretty cool, and we've got an incredible network of people to draw on. So if we do something pretty cool here, people are going to take note. And so yeah, this is about that creating the common language. The other thing that the Lexicon have done is they've got a library of 5,000 Lex icons, which is in some way to try to create a shared language for how all of these distinct groups talk about and discuss ecological benefits. So this is an asset that we've got something to play with. Douglas has sent me the full library of Lex icons. And yeah, what would it look like to implement this in the ReFi ecosystem? So we could start to classify projects according to these tags, and suddenly we can create a knowledge graph of stuff that's going on that relates to different topics and connect in all of the projects that connect to that. And what kind of intelligence system could we create to help people find the right tools, the right methodologies, the right ideas, and the right sources of funding, and the translation and interoperability between that. What if we did an NFT for every one of these practices? And I don't know, there's just a bunch of ideas we could explore.
Tokenize everything.
Tokenize everything.
Back to the classics.
Yes, we've got principles. Yeah, this is some of the case studies we worked on, so we can add, hopefully, TDF to the case study map. And see, yeah, so this is starting to see, okay, you have the ecological benefits here, this is how we maybe compare the projects. You're saying, oh, they've done an analysis for all 6 of the ecological benefits. Or, if only 4 of the ecological benefits are relevant, cool, that's fine. Just do the analysis for 4 and say we're not really involved in those other 2 so much. And then it's up for the funders to go, oh, I'm interested in these 2 ecological benefits, or I want projects that have the full range. right? Because there's a different requirements from different buyers who are interested in different parts of the stack. So yeah, that's a bit more on the onboarding tool that I think is coming out soon. I'm looking forward to exploring that. The digital fingerprinting stuff. So yeah, imagine we can have this digital fingerprint. This is TDF. And we have then the ecological benefits around it that we've created, and then the lexicon of different practices that were used to create those ecological benefits. So here, for example, there's been talk about the permaculture forests, or the way they've turned the soil, or all of the different practices and methodologies and things that have used can be expressed, and then how all those practices have then led to the ecological benefits that have been created here. So it's kind of, this is hopefully a dashboard we might be able to build for the TDF project. And of course, connecting it with Sylvie's data sources and the technology that you guys have built, I think is going to be key. So yeah, this is a bit more detail on the. So actually, this leads into one more point I think I'd like to make as well. Is one of the things that the Lexicon and Douglas crew are raving about at the moment is this separation between the distinctness between the quantitative data side. We're talking about sensors in the soil, satellite imagery, like physically measuring these different things with hardcore numbers and data, which is super important, but it's also quite a global north perspective to like say that we're going to apply all of this tech solutions to it. And a lot of these indigenous communities and communities across the globe, it's not super accessible, or it's not the language that they use to describe their project. And so as well as digital MRV, which is amazing, and we need that, there's also this work around, indigenous MRV, IMRV. Like how can we take the languages and the practices that indigenous communities use to describe, some of them have, for example, 20 different words for the quality of the soil. Like, how can you take the language that they're using to express that and say, how does that actually translate to the ecological benefits that's happening? So, can we create this kind of dual digital MRV system with indigenous MRV, the qualitative and the quantitative, bring those together? We're already starting to do that here with like the video interviews we capture, the drone footage, the kind of more qualitative accounts of what's happening to the land. It actually generates valuable data that is sometimes hard to translate into quantitative methods. So, yeah, I'm going to wrap things up. That's the simulator that we went through. I can share the link to that on the chat, but it's mapping the different buyers. So you have on here the compliance markets, the sovereign nations, the corporates who have a mandate to buy ecological assets, institutional investors, to your retail, your voluntary carbon markets kind of stuff, where you have your retail or consumer business buyers. Or to grants and philanthropy markets. And so it's a really useful tool for helping to understand those different buyers and then potentially make connections, right? This will evolve, I think, into some form of matchmaking tool, essentially, to help the various sides of this market come together and understand how to actually coordinate and exchange value.
Good question on the previous slide. I saw that there was like data integrity there, trust. How is this evaluated?
So I think it would be evaluated with a mixture of like, say you have a super rich amount of quantitative data that you had a measurement of a beginning state, and then quantitative data leading all the way up to the end state that you've got, and all of the data surrounding it, as well as a qualitative account from various interviews and people and all of that kind of data. That's going to have a really high granularity of certainty that impact has happened. Whereas if you just have one person saying, yeah, I went out and the soil was really good, and there was this practice has gone on, and there's some surrounding data and methodologies that have been used, it's going to have a lower level of certainty and a lower level of granularity, which may be fine, but funders and people and sponsors are going to be more interested the higher certainty and the higher impact you can have. So it's really starting to align the incentives around things that the ecological assets that have a higher value are the ones that, one, are creating more holistic, diverse forms of impact and good amounts of those, and have a higher certainty and verifiability and accountability to those impacts. Those are going to be the highest value assets in this new market infrastructure if we pull this off. Or should do anyway. So yeah, is there any other questions?
Where's Merlin?
This week.
Yeah, so I guess my question is kind of what next, and I know a lot of this is in our hands and in the hands of all the people who contributed to the research, but at what stage of this research is it? So, I mean, obviously Google funded this, there are all those companies and projects on the slide that you shared, but is this currently being used? Is it being tried?
Yeah. So what? It's a good question. So what the process so far has been? This has actually all been a little bit under the curtain, behind the curtain a little bit. The activator, and only just recently, it's why I can share this with all you now. Has it been released for kind of public consultation? It was released at New York Climate Week to a bunch of ESG professionals. Because New Day, the impact investment platform that I mentioned, is actually now implementing EBF across their entire impact investment platform, and have now got a series of other things that I can't even talk about that are going on in that direction. And so, yeah, where we're at now is the framework has been released publicly, and there's now an explosion of interest from different people that's kind of emerging in these projects. And the plan is to then do another activator starting in February, which I'm going to be involved in. That's going to be focusing. There's going to be 6 work streams, one for each of the ecological benefits, and then an additional work stream for governance, because they are creating an EBF Commons. As I mentioned, the Lexicon is a non-profit, and so what they do is they develop these activators, they gather all those experts, and then they give all of those amazing assets that they've built to other value-aligned partners. And Douglas has explicitly expressed that he'd like ReFi DAO to help steward the EBF assets as part of the EBF Commons, but there'll be a diversity of other actors in there. And we've got a chance to be a part of this EBF Commons with an array of other interesting organizations and co-design what that commons look like. So, yeah, that's some of the stuff coming. I guess there is some slides here about what's coming next. This is the roadmap that EBF had suggested at a more global level, and then I can also talk about the potential next steps for us as ReFi EBF. But yeah, they're bringing together this MRV curated library, gathering the most effective ways to measure the ecological benefits across all of the different scales, contexts, landscapes, localities, and having a massive library, which again I think is going to plug into the work that Trex is doing and others in the ReFi space. And yeah, this impact investment translation tool, how do you translate all of the impact investment opportunities out there instead of just having these vague ESG funds? I don't know if anyone's tried to do impact investing before, but there's like a list of 10,000 different ESG funds, and I'm looking at it like, is it? What impact are you having? Like, how do I know? What if all of those investments had an EBF analysis, and instantly you could see, oh, that's the impact it's having. It's sequestering this much carbon. It's increasing biodiversity by this much. It's a framework for the regenerative paradigm that goes beyond sustainability, ESG, greenwashing, and actually tries to do this stuff for real. And so, yeah. You can see why I'm like shilling this so much, because I've just had like my mind blown successively over like many weeks, and I'm like, guys, this is big. So then we'll be coming up with a governance structure for the EBF Commons. There's a working stream around this IMRV, translating indigenous knowledge into qualitative measurement, reporting and verification tools to express positive impacts. The carbon market translation tool, the various different revenue fees, the microgrants. And this is where I think we can focus on, because we have Web3 infrastructure to distribute microgrants to communities all around the world that maybe have been using different currencies, and it's quite difficult to do in a traditional sense. Some of them may not be banked. And so what if ReFi local nodes and other kind of local nodes, Greenpill chapters, Regens Unite, could be like on the ground bridges from the complex kind of hypercert Web3 tech that we're using and the indigenous projects and communities on the ground that then allows those indigenous projects to access the benefits that the tech we're building can provide and the funding that can trickle down.
Connecting the micro and macro and the meso.
Exactly. What I'd be really keen to explore is how we can then plug in all of the data that we collect with Sylvie, all of the stuff that's captured on here, then run through the question set with Sam and Josh and anyone else who is interested to join in on that, and start to then come up with a design around an EBF hypercert that we can start to then use as an MVP to then roll out to other nodes and then create the foundations for this micro grant platform for EBF projects across the globe. So, yeah, and they're also doing a lot of stuff in the corporate ESG world as well, and UN SDGs. So again, there's some really interesting connections that can be leveraged if we demonstrate our piece of the puzzle.
So they super connected now.
Bitcoin would be the next round, not this one, right?
This round, I'm hoping we can get into this round. It's open right now, the applications to the Gitcoin climate. So basically, Gitcoin has a climate round that it's run since basically the beginning of Gitcoin. It's usually 250K that goes towards climate projects. Most recently, they've spun out. Gitcoin are going through a process of decentralization, and the climate round has now spun out into an organization called the Climate Coordination Network that are helping to run and continually raise capital for this round. They've just opened applications for GG19, and so if we get our shit together, Douglas has basically said that I can lead the EBF application in that Gitcoin round. So if we do well, there's a matching cap total of 25K. So if we can unite our collective marketing reach with TreeGens, with Regens Unite, with ReFi DAO, and do super well in this round for ReFi EBF, that will hopefully raise us an initial pot of funding of $10,000 to $25,000 that we can put into another quadratic funding round that then funds the ecological benefits assets that have been created, with this ecological benefit asset as the first kind of project that plugs into that, but then in creating a framework for others to do so.
And hopefully that'll be matched with true institutional.
Yes, well, I think once we've proven the model, shown it working, shown the ecological assets, shown our quadratic funding mechanism that's funding those ecological assets, that's when I think we can go to institutions, to corporates, to other people to say, hey, you should sponsor our matching pool now. Look how innovative you'll look, and look how many ecological benefits you can claim.
I'm so bullish on that, man.
That is the way. Surely that's the way. It's like, this is the evolution of carbon markets, like, in my view.
I have some ideas on MRV libraries, but we can talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of stuff to workshop from here. So we'll have to kind of work out as the week goes on which bits. But if by the end of the week we can start to have this kind of hypercert thing, because I know that Gitcoin are also leaning into actually using the embedding of hypercerts into Gitcoin projects so that we can actually understand the Gitcoin projects that are actually having an impact. Because now with these quadratic funding pools, we have so many different projects applying to Gitcoin rounds every quarter, and people just funding them, but we actually need to know how do we align funding with the projects that are having the most impact, and that's why they're leaning into kind of integrating hypercerts within Gitcoin, so we're kind of positioning ourselves for that transition as well.